Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Lots to get to. Let me dive in here. A lot of geopolitical things happening this week, of course. Big week for all of that. And as you might expect, a lot of panic among the unknowledgeable as to what's really been going on this entire time and the fact that there is a plan in place and we're actually living through it. But again, the one-dimensional thinkers are looking at everything at face value and just yelling and screaming and moaning and XYZ. As I've said, regarding those individuals who again don't want to take in evidence and don't want to look at all of the evidence, let alone evidence from the past, what's going on right now is going to confuse them. And they certainly don't want to hear an explanation that's counter to anything that they actually believe to be happening. But as we all know, beliefs are not facts. So I'll get into that in just a minute. But first of all, the executive orders that were signed are massive. Again, a lot of these on the 25th, but on the 24th, imposing tariffs on countries importing Venezuelan oil, that was a huge one. Modernizing payments to and from America's bank account. This again has more to do with check fraud than anything else, which is a good thing, and getting rid of that as much as humanly possible. Immediate declassification of materials related to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Crossfire Hurricane investigation. That is massive. So the declass that everybody has been hoping for and wanting this entire time, certainly dating back to the Q posts, is happening right now. Again, the importance of this cannot be stated enough. This is huge. Everybody is going to see all of these individuals who were wrapped up in this, all of the people who were involved, that the entire Russia thing was an entire lie. Endless people believed it because they were stupid and they weren't taking in evidence. They weren't investigating anything. So it's amazing that, again, all of this declass is coming out. This is exactly what we've wanted all of these years, and it's happening. People should be drinking champagne and eating cake right now. But too many black pillars are out there whining and moaning and saying that nothing is happening. You have to be kidding me. It's happening right now. It's going on right now. The next one he signed was protecting America's bank accounts against fraud, waste, and abuse. Again, money laundering, check fraud, all of the USAID fraud, writing a check that goes to some person who doesn't exist, and then it gets cashed by something or someone for a thing that wasn't happening in the first place. The next one, preserving and protecting the integrity of American elections, a huge one. Again, you can read these executive orders word for word on the White House's website under Executive Actions on that tab, Executive Orders. And again, I highly recommend clicking on it and giving these a read. They're very, very specific, and they're lengthy, and they are worth the read. Again, individuals now nationwide have to prove that they are a citizen. This is an executive order. It again is a strongly worded legal suggestion also, that states had better get their affairs in order regarding all of this, and that the House of Representatives and the Senate had better do their job also in making this official. Now, yes, unfortunately, voting in states regarding certain state elections is a state issue. However, everybody gets to vote for a president. But it should be, of course, every citizen, every legal citizen, which is the entire point. And we know that that has not been happening. In fact, there's a big dust-up right now online having to do with Scott Pressler, the gay conservative who goes from state to state registering individuals to vote and be registered Republicans, which is 100% fine. And I'm glad he's doing that, and that's great. But he got called out online for being a fraud election denier, that he doesn't think that the 2020 election was stolen, or at the very least, he's saying so. Now, people have to keep something in mind regarding Scott Pressler. He has a history as being associated with a Jewish-owned, Israeli-backed, a talent agency. That's it. And then, of course, he was fired from a political job that he had for having sexual relations in one of the buildings that was affiliated with one of these, again, political PACs or registered voting buildings with another man. So, I mean, look, the evidence of voter fraud is out there. Donald Trump has even recently spoken about it on another individual's podcast. He's openly said the documentation exists, the American public is going to see this, and we knew this was happening back in 2020. We were told this was going to happen. So this is interesting information that's being dropped for the public to openly see, but people aren't thinking past the poem in front of their own face. They're not looking through their fingers and seeing the much larger picture, let alone from a multidimensional standpoint, let alone upside down and inside out. There's a ton going on. Again, it goes on here. It says, addressing risks from Jenner and Block. This specifically, again, it says the administration is committed to addressing the significant risks associated with law firms, particularly so-called big law firms, big law in quotes, that engage in conduct detrimental to critical American interests. Let me give you an example. Of course, Jenner and Block is a big one, engages in massive lawfare and a number of other things. But the Paul Weiss lawfare, at the very beginning of this week, they completely did a 180. Donald Trump signed an executive order going after the Paul Weiss law firm, again, loaded with the Jewish lobby individuals there in Washington, D.C., and then they did a complete 180 just a day or so later and said, we will cooperate with the President of the United States. We aren't going to discriminate against anybody. Equal fairness under the law for all individuals, and that's exactly what's going to happen, and blah, blah, blah. It's very simple. They were given an offer they couldn't refuse. There's no way that the President of the United States signs an executive order without military intel and documentation going after these individuals for engaging in treason and sedition. Now, yes, I would love to watch them all hang and watch their legal building burn to the ground and plant a tree right where the legal building used to be. I would love for that to be the case. But you also have to use these individuals with leverage. That has to happen too. I'll get into exactly how that's happening with a specified senator here in just a little bit, but you have to use leverage against these people. And you can turn these people against other individuals because, again, you have leverage over them. This right here is one of the strategies that gets used all of the time. There's no sense in fighting an enemy when they've already destroyed themselves. That's, again, Sun Tzu, The Art of War. It's happening on a constant basis here. Donald Trump again signs an executive order going after a law firm, and the law firm panics. Now he signs this one, which again, in this executive order regarding Jenner and Block, it says the following. It says, in addition, Jenner was thrilled to rehire the unethical Andrew Weissman after his time engaging in partisan prosecution as part of Robert Mueller's entirely unjustified investigation. Andrew Weissman, and his career has been rooted in weaponizing government or in weaponized government and abuse of power, including devastating tens of thousands of American families who worked for the now defunct Arthur Andersen LLP, only to have his unlawfully aggressive prosecution overturned by the Supreme Court. The numerous reports of Weissman's dishonesty, including pursuit of non-existent crimes, bribery to foreign nationals, and overt demand that the federal government pursue a political agenda against me is a concerning indictment of Jenner's values and priorities. Again, it's a lengthy executive order, but it's well done. And it's not just him going after his so-called political opponents. These are individuals who were engaging in sedition. They were openly lying about what was going on with Donald Trump and not going on with Donald Trump in an effort to smear him, of course, in the entire media. And it didn't work. It goes on, he signed an executive order granting clemency to Devon Archer, who again worked with Hunter Biden. And then, of course, the entire Biden family lied about him and threw him under the bus. He was also interviewed by Tucker Carlson almost immediately once Tucker Carlson left Fox News, probably because Fox News wouldn't grant him the interview. Again, I'm not saying Devon Archer's a clean kind of guy. I don't know him. But he certainly got mistreated by the Biden administration, no doubt about it. And then finally, adjusting imports on automobiles and automobile parts into the United States. Beautiful. Again, it's tariff related, and this is a good thing. So again, the D-class is happening right now. All of this information is dropping right now. These orders are being signed as D-class orders right now, which is awesome. Now let me mention this. Switching gears here to the Signal business. I brought it up in the war video, and I think I brought it up again in the last episode. The business of Signal specifically being used by individuals in government is not a new thing. In Q Drop 633, which was on January 27th of 2018, the only thing that was shared was an anonymous post that Q reposted. That was a screenshot of Signal's website. It just says Signal in the upper left-hand corner of the screenshot, showing how Signal works or what it looks like. Fast, simple, secure. Privacy that fits in your pocket. Android, iPhone, desktop. And there's a picture, of course, of, what's-his-face, Edward Snowden, and 3 other individuals, some woman and then 2 other guys. I don't know who the other people are, but the questions remain: who created Signal? What was Signal created for? See, the thing with Edward Snowden is Edward Snowden was very famously one of these individuals who used to work for the NSA and the CIA. And there was this cross-pollinating that was taking place between these 3-letter agencies. So they would again quit their job at the NSA and then go to work for the CIA. Thereby, of course, having all of the knowledge of what was going on at the NSA and then bringing that over to the CIA, and vice versa, and back and forth. It's not a good thing is the whole point. Signal is exactly how the enemy was communicating with one another, and deep state government was communicating with the media and anonymous media individuals using Signal. That's exactly why this is in the news now. It's not an accident. This is an exposure. That's exactly what's going on here. So when Donald Trump openly says the following, which he said in the Oval Office just the other day, which I believe was on Wednesday, he said it could be that Signal doesn't work. This is something that Biden should have taken care of. I don't know that Signal works. We use Signal. Everyone uses Signal. It could be that it's a defective platform. Again, this is a big deal. Now, this is where it gets into the Intel Committee for both the Senate and the House, where John Ratcliffe and Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel, along with 2 generals, a 4-star and a 3-star general, all testified. First of all, those Intel meetings, both of those Intel meetings, again, the House Intel Committee and the Senate Intel Committee, those are yearly scheduled meetings for that day and time. Which means everybody knew that the 3 of them and the 5 of them ultimately with the 2 generals were going to be testifying to those 2 particular committees about a wide range of issues, of course, with everything that they're dealing with. So the release of this Signal information by the Atlantic journalist, who also happens to be Jewish, I know, every single time, was not an accident. That was on purpose. Or, again, not just on purpose, but was it a trap? And the answer is yes, because this is a military operation. This is 5D, 6D, 7D chess. That's exactly what's going on here. It's a we know that you know that we know that you know kind of thing, back and forth all of the time. So what happened in those hearings? What happened was a level of hypocrisy that is astounding. Every single Democrat senator in the Senate Intel Committee was asking the 3 of them or the 5 of them a series of questions that they never asked Hillary Clinton. Not once. They never asked Hillary Clinton any of those questions. In 2016, 2015, or the years after, they never brought her in and said, describe for us how you were maintaining classified information. The fact is that she was doing it on servers in her bathroom with over 33,000 emails that were in her possession, and then that led to her printing off, or at the very least shredding, printed off emails that she had in her possession that were classified and then placing them in burn bags and having her staffers shred them and place them in burn bags. That's getting rid of evidence. Did any of them ask her about that? No. So the hypocrisy here and the double standard is on record for everybody to see. This is not an accident. This is a part of the plan. This is the soft disclosure of that kind of hypocrisy, which is perfect because it's playing right into their hands. They don't even know what they're doing. They just, again, as senators and as congressional individuals, certainly on the Dem side, they're quite literally, again, asking questions that they've never asked to other people when clearly they could have at any time, but they never did because they were told not to. This should tell everybody how controlled all of these people are. Again, Mark Warner is the Senate Intel Committee co-chair. He's not in charge of it, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately, he's a loser. But Tom Cotton's an even bigger loser because, of course, he's completely owned by Zionists and the Jewish lobby itself. Which, again, he can't even lead a committee because he doesn't even know how to shut people up. But either way, I watched the entire thing, and it was really educational. I mean, Mark Warner was shaking. His hands were shaking because he's been caught. All these people have been caught. In fact, there was a very interesting moment about 36 minutes in. I think it was the 36-minute mark of that Senate Intel hearing. And you can go and watch it yourself, but I think there were at least 2 or 3 protesters total in the room, and the very first protester who stood up and started yelling immediately started yelling, "Stop funding Israel." And they just kept screaming it over and over and over again. It was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. Tom Cotton got real pissed. And he's like, and oh, by the way, in case anybody's curious, that person who was screaming all of that is a member of Act Blue, which is funded by the Chinese Communist Party. No, they're not. They're funded by Zionists, the same people that Tom Cotton claims to align with. Joke's on him. Again, the whole thing is a dog and pony show. But every now and again, a little kernel of truth is always going to come out in some of these hearings. It's absolutely amazing. There was another kernel of truth that came out regarding Signal specifically, and it had to do with John Ratcliffe, who, again, I think is a very good person. I think this guy is ethically sound. He could be one of the most ethical CIA directors we've ever had. But he openly, again, shows up, and he starts to tell about his experience with Signal. He says, I don't use it. He said, in fact, I showed up to the CIA, and somebody walks into my office who works for the CIA and says, do you have Signal downloaded on your laptop computer? And he says, no. And they said, well, let me download it because this is what everybody uses to communicate and what a lot of people use to communicate. He still doesn't use it. Which means, again, what capability does Signal have regarding an application itself, let alone within government? Do you even have to use it in order for it to monitor you or record your voice or what it is that you do, type, or say? Who's to know? But Signal, again, as I stated earlier, is in numerous Q drops. Let me read a few others. Certainly in at least 2 others, I should say. In drop 4670, it just says signal.org. http:// signal.org. So it's just the website. Because again, he or they were pointing directly to this particular application as being a source of investigation for anonymous individuals, as if to say, take a look at this. This isn't normal. And then 2 drops later, again on September 11th of 2020, which is drop 4672. It's an anonymous post from Jack Dorsey on X, or Twitter at the time, where Jack Dorsey is saying to people, download @Signal app, signal.org. And he's responding to a Randy Molla, Rani Molla, Ranimolla, some female here. And she said, Signal became one of the top 10 most downloadable social apps on iOS yesterday for the first time, according to the data from App Annie. The last time Signal downloads ranked nearly as high was on the day of Trump's inauguration. And then the post goes on and says, Signal since day one. Did they know? Quote, Signal became one of the top 10 most downloadable social apps on iOS. And again, he reposts exactly what she just said. Why would that be the case? Q then responded and said, coordinated, analyze downloads, pre-protests, and then in brackets, riots. It says start 60 protests in brackets, riots. Coincidence? Then Q said, now think fire fires, unquote. Again, they were using Signal to coordinate with people on the ground what to do and when to do it. That's exactly what was going on in this particular case also. Somebody inside the government, again, invited the Goldberg journalist, quote unquote, from The Atlantic to take part in all of this, and then dropped that information, ironically, right before the scheduled intel meetings for the DNI, FBI, and CIA, in an effort, again, to smear them because they think that this works. It was a trap. They got caught. Signal got caught. The developers of Signal got caught. The entire Signal operation just got exposed. That's exactly what happened here. It's fantastic. But endless people, again, don't know this because they're too busy blackpilling and putting a gun in their mouth as they sweat all of the time, saying nothing's going to change, there is no plan, we're all doomed. Like I've said before, if you believe that, kill yourself. Just end it. If there's no hope for anything, then why are you still alive? Why are you still, again, getting online with all these black pillars and just whining and moaning? There's amazing things happening right now. This is part of it. But again, it's going to be confusing to people who refuse to take in evidence. And people, again, screaming that the Q operation was all bullshit. You have got to be joking. 7 years ago, we were told about Signal. 7 years ago. Most people don't use Signal. The only time, and I mean this, the only time I've ever even heard of Signal was back in the day when individuals, again, and it's still a very prevailing rumor with some evidence that still lends itself to being a possibility, the business of communications being shut down nationwide or in part nationwide. And that people were actually, and again, it could have been Signal people themselves in an effort to get the app downloaded on people's phones for surveillance purposes, nefariously speaking, of course. But there were rumors that Signal was going to be one of those apps that would still be functional, even in a massive internet/power outage, phone line outage, that somehow Signal would still be operational. Well, for whom exactly? For your average citizen or for people in the government, again, trying to nefariously do something to someone or a group of people? I'm not sure, but that was the only time that I've ever heard of Signal. And again, it was brought to my attention by a very knowledgeable woman who is rather wide awake on the entire issue. But again, I've never downloaded the app, let alone used it. I mean, I just use text threads with groups of people instead of using a separate application. I don't know. It's odd, but the point is that it's nefarious, that its origin was nefarious, that its usage within government, again, is rather nefarious. And as Donald Trump said, when he was signing a lot of those executive orders in that conference room, he openly said, hey, look, I wish people would meet in a lead room with a lead floor, lead walls, and a lead roof, and, without their cell phones, and they could just communicate about something that was taking place. He goes, that's my preferred method of communication. But he's bringing this up on purpose. Again, certainly for the normies to basically start looking into what Signal really is. Those of us who have followed the Q drops, we already know. So I'm going to reiterate this one more time because it matters. Anytime a particular word is overused or seems out of place, that is brought up either by Donald Trump or it's a piece of technology or whatever it is, my recommendation is you go to the Q boards and you type it in the search box, that particular word or that particular application or whatever it may be, and get in a time machine and go back in time and look at how often, if at all, those words or those applications or those particular phrases are used within Q drops, and then look at the connection between all of them. Let me read this now, because this has to do with Lindsey Graham. Again, Donald Trump makes a truth post endorsing Lindsey Graham to be again the senator of South Carolina. First of all, that decision and that pick is up to the people of South Carolina. It's not up to Donald Trump. There are a lot of people, again, who could run for that position, primary Lindsey Graham, and beat him, and that's 100% fine. But Lindsey Graham, ladies and gentlemen, is owned by the good guys. So again, just a quick little review of Lindsey Graham here. Lindsey Graham is a known homosexual. That's fine, I guess, if he wants to do that. He's certainly blackmailed in one way or another. Among other things, he was friends with John McCain. And of course, he was bipartisan friends with all other Democrats who were filtering and laundering money through Ukraine before Donald Trump even showed up. The military has Lindsey Graham by the short hairs. He's completely controlled. The military executed John McCain for treason and sedition. They knew what he was up to. They knew what he was doing. Not just, of course, back when he was a soldier, back during Vietnam. They knew full well what he was doing back then, which was enough to be, of course, convicted of treason and sedition. And I've even been over that entire history on the show before, that he was essentially given a pass, but also at the exact same time was told, because again, when you're found guilty but not charged, you're found guilty but not sentenced to any particular kind of penalty, you theoretically cannot run for office, let alone vote for anything. And unfortunately, of course, he was immediately ushered into the Senate and certainly, again, into politics as a whole, because he was completely controlled by bad guys back then to vote for particular agendas. Again, he was wrapped up with North Korea, the CIA, Ukraine, you name it. And I suppose this was, a theory from back in the day, which was remarkably awful, was that he was directly affiliated with what was going to be an EMP attack on the United States, thereby blamed on North Korea to then create war in North Korea. And then, of course, give America more of a stronghold, so to speak, toward China. Because, of course, North Korea sits between China and South Korea. And using that as leverage for a variety of different reasons, I'm sure, which are all bad. But either way, the amount of life that would have been lost in the United States, if that theory were accurate, was going to be immense. Millions of people would have died. So they got to John McCain, the good guys, and they said, "We've got you now, and now we're going to execute you." And one of John McCain's last moves, of course, was to vote no on overturning almost all of Obamacare. Very famously, that was the case. He walks into the Senate floor, he puts his thumb down, and then he walks out. And then everybody's told that he dies of cancer. And yet endless people were on talk radio, and of course on all of the political shows, including John Kasich, ultimately saying that he was put to death. And even his own daughter looked at Don Jr. on The View, of all shows, when she was a host on The View, and openly said, "When you executed my father," or something along those lines. I mean, it was a direct implication because she knew what her father had done too and was still defending it because she's a psycho. So they have Lindsey Graham by the short hairs. He's completely controlled. Here's what True Stormy Joe said on X, quote, "You can tell who is well-read on Q and who isn't. Trump endorsed Lindsey Graham. Non-Q people are shocked, quote unquote. Q people understand Lindsey has been a scumbag, but since DJT and the Q team took over." It says Lindsey rolled. "We like good singers," in parentheses. Lindsey has followed orders and done as told. Think about the Kavanaugh hearing for the Supreme Court, is what he's implying. As an example, even when it seems, quote, he's going against Trump, unquote. It's part of the show to make DJT seem more centrist and reasonable. Abortion as an example. You don't need to like Lindsey to understand Q-Team/DJT. uses whomever they need to. Patriots in full control. Understand the above, and it all makes perfect sense. And it does, but it makes sense to us who followed the Q drops. So here's Q drop 1305. Again, having to do specifically with Lindsey Graham and John McCain. It says the following, and this was on April 30th of 2018. It says no name out. And no name was John McCain. They always referred to him as no name. And then it says now. And then there's a Twitter post, again from Lindsey Graham. And then it says, we love good singers. Now, what did Lindsey Graham say back then on X? The post is gone. The post no longer exists, which is the case in a lot of these Q posts because the posts again were later deleted because they don't want people again to go back and see what was initially said during that particular time. There's another Q post here, 2291, on September 28th of 2018, where it says the following. Again, Q was reposting one of his earlier posts, 2093, where they said, interesting line of questions. This specifically had to do with the Kavanaugh hearing. He said normal, and of course the timestamp on the YouTube video in the hearing was the 26-minute mark, where you may recall, if you watched that hearing as I did, in its entirety, Lindsey Graham was asking Brett Kavanaugh about, again, killing individuals in the United States who were guilty of treason during wartime. That can you legally do that? And the answer is yes. And that's exactly what Kavanaugh said. That's a line of questioning that no one else ever brought up, past or during that entire hearing itself. So Q said, interesting line of questions. Normal, military law versus criminal law. There is a difference between the two, by the way. It says, think executive order. Think HRC panic. Hillary Rodham Clinton. Do you believe in coincidences? The more you have more than you know, Q. And then Q wrapped up in that particular post, that original one, and said, did you see Senator Graham's speech today? Coincidence? Enjoy the show. It's part of the disclosure here, dating all the way back then. And then there was this post, 2583, which was on December 11th of 2018, where it's an ABC News story, and then it says, think Graham-Kavanaugh exchange. And the particular article from ABC News was titled, Civilians Could Serve on Military Tribunals. And that was an article back on December 10th of 2001. This is confusing for people who didn't follow along at the time. It's not confusing for us. We know what this is. It's called evidence. There's just overwhelming evidence that there is more going on here than what meets the eye. And I should even be more specific. There's more going on here than what meets the eye of the individual who hasn't taken in copious amounts of evidence over numerous years regarding that entire operation, which is still ongoing. But again, for those of us that were involved from a certainly research standpoint and reading about it and following along, it was invaluable. The amount of information that was being disclosed to everybody was invaluable, and it wasn't easy to read. I mean, a lot of that stuff was horrific. You're talking again about Satanism, secret societies, raping children, body parts, Epstein Island, corruption in all forms of government, but also how militaries operate when they're trying to take back their country from very bad people who wanted to kill us. The people who followed the Q drops, I would say upwards of 98 to 99% of them did not take the shots. They didn't take the COVID shots. Because during that entire operation dating back to, again, the latter half of 2017, we were being educated on all of the fraud, corruption, clandestine operations, and depopulation agenda. That's why we didn't fall for it. That's why when it happened, we knew what was coming. We knew what was going to happen, and we were screaming it from the rooftops for people. But people didn't believe us. They would rather believe a stranger on TV than believe us. People, again, who were doing the research, learning about this kind of thing. reading the books on a constant basis about depopulation dating back 100+ years. This continues to be the problem. When people close their eyes, close their mouths, and close their ears to open evidence that's right in front of people's faces, yeah, you're going to reap what you sow. Which again is why there's a lot of right-wing, so-called right-wing black pillars who are out there just whining and moaning all of the time, complaining about everything that Donald Trump is doing without giving credit where credit is due and understanding the breadth and depth of all of the evidence that is at play here. They can't handle it because they weren't a part of it when it was actually happening. So what does that mean? It really makes them really no different than the mainstream media. It makes them very similar. Something happens, they become overly emotional about it, or something happens and they don't even ask questions about it because they don't know what the hell is going on. And they don't want to even be perceived as being somebody who doesn't know what's going on because they'll lose audience members. And clicks, likes, and shares and promo codes and money is all they give a shit about. That's too bad, because that's not the point. It's about trying to find the truth, no matter where it is and no matter how uncomfortable it might be. Take, for example, again, the ongoing civil war that's taking place with all of these judges. This is not an accident. I've spoken about this before. You're well aware. This is the interagency civil war from one branch of government to the next that has been in place this entire time, and now the American people, even the dead asleep, are openly seeing this. Unfortunately, some of the more gullible Americans are actually advocating for this kind of civil war. That the judicial system, so to speak, is standing up against Donald Trump because that's their separation of powers and they're allowed to do that. Not when it comes to the law. Not when it comes to following the law and what executive power ultimately means. Donald Trump truthed this the other day, said, quote, "How disgraceful is it that Judge, quote unquote, James Boasberg has just been given a fourth Trump case, something which is statistically impossible. There is no way for a Republican, especially a Trump Republican, to win before him. He is highly conflicted, not only in his hatred of me, massive Trump derangement syndrome, but also because of disqualifying family conflicts. Boasberg, who is the chief judge of the D.C. District Court, seems to be grabbing the Trump cases all to himself, even though it is not supposed to happen that way. Is there still such a thing as the wheel, quote unquote, where the judges are chosen rather fairly and at random? The good news is that it probably doesn't matter, because it is virtually impossible for me to get an honest ruling in D.C. Our nation's courts are broken, with New York and D.C. being the most preeminent of all in their corruption and radicalism. There must be an immediate investigation into this rigged system before it's too late. There's already been one. The military already has all of this information on all of these people. These truth posts are just to wet people's whistle and to get them to understand what's really been going on this entire time. You don't actually think the executive branch and the military doesn't know that the judicial system is completely compromised, like it is in every country, probably made up of pedophiles, rapists, and murderers, and people who are blackmailed. Of course it is. I mean, and of course they would know. They're the flippin' military. Why would they not know? But they're not going to tell people this because that's evidence for a crime that has yet, again, to reach a military tribunal. These things take time. That's why everybody, again, is screaming about Pam Bondi. Well, she hasn't arrested anybody, and she's a Jew, and she's controlled by the Jewish lobby, and this, that, and the other. These things take time. Even Alina Habba said it. Trump's, one of Trump's former lawyers there, who's now the interim state prosecutor in New Jersey. She even said it, that this is evidence, that evidence cannot be disclosed to the public, specifically when it pertains to individuals and individual acts. We have all the evidence we need on all these criminals. We know who's guilty and who isn't. The lights get turned on and they run right out into the public. The senators start screaming at the top of their lungs during these hearings. We know who's guilty and who isn't. But as far as a military tribunal goes, and certainly, again, federal indictments and sealed indictments, that individual has to go before a grand jury, and that evidence has to go before a grand jury. And then, again, they're dead to rights. Not to mention, you typically don't go in front of a grand jury if you aren't already guilty of something very heinous. They already have the evidence. The grand jury has already made they've already made essentially their ruling, so to speak, but certainly the individuals who are responsible for creating the indictment have already done so because the evidence is overwhelming. This is all good stuff. Good stuff is happening. Yes, I don't like that, innocent children are being killed overseas when a bomb gets dropped. I don't like that, and I don't think anybody likes that. Whether it be in Gaza, Yemen, or wherever. People don't like that, and I don't like it either. And I don't have, again, an explanation one way or another for it. I just know that that's war. And if you're going to kill somebody and take somebody out, unfortunately, innocent people are going to lose their lives too. That's a sad reality of all of this. But again, it's warfare. And we have CIA people in foreign countries all of the time, working with other bad people all of the time. Again, to attack ships and 1,000 other things. I mean, you don't actually think that people who live in a sandbox can actually attack a cargo ship and shoot anything at it and blow it up. Where'd they get the weapons? Why are these individuals, again, running around freely? And why have they been allowed to run around freely? It's because our government has allowed it to happen. I mentioned it, I think, in a previous episode. Yemen is a funny place. I mean, it's a shithole, but it's a deep state CIA Zionist controlled apparatus again, completely designed to foment chaos, a number of different places. So again, until places like that are wiped out and the people who live within them who are responsible for the wrongdoing, of course, are wiped out, well, it'll continue to be those kinds of playgrounds. But Donald Trump worldwide has a great deal of world support. So again, yeah, there's a global civil war taking place. No doubt about that. And as always, there's an interagency civil war taking place on a nationwide level here in America also. No doubt about that either. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. But again, some of this evidence, again, is right in front of people's faces if they're just willing to take a deep breath, slow down, take emotion out of the equation, and look at the evidence. It's all right there. But it's just there for the people, again, who want to actually absorb it and look at it. It's not there for the overly emotional. Okay, speaking of evidence and overly emotional, let me shift gears here to education. Very locally, just to refresh everyone's memory on the local school district in the town where I live, which is Talawanda City Schools in Oxford, Ohio. The people who run this school district do not know what they're doing. Now, joke's on them, and the funny part, of course, is I'm sure you're well aware. Most people who run multi-million-dollar corporations like public school districts don't know what the hell they're doing. They blindly adopt games, gimmicks, and nonsense. They blindly tell one another and gaslight one another that what they're doing is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And yet, their reading scores are in the tank. Their comprehension scores are in the tank. These children's lives are quite literally being wasted, and the time that they're spending on absolute nonsense is being wasted. Let me give you a couple of examples. This was first dating back to last Thursday's school board meeting. There was, of course, and always has been, and it doesn't just pertain, of course, to the state of Ohio, but there's always been the debate of the business of merit pay for school teachers. That the more quote-unquote successful, based on God knows what parameter, that students themselves would be within a classroom setting, that should somehow lead to more money in that teacher's pocket. As a result of, again, either standardized test scores or localized scores or whatever it might be. Me personally, I am 100% against merit pay in education. Why? Because it's fraudulent. It's a recipe for fraud. Now, the entire business is fraudulent because the people teaching these particular subjects, specifically science and history, don't understand that the very subjects that they are teaching are fraudulent. It's not the truth about the real world that we live in. People either figure this out when they become adults. Some students already know it to be true, even though they're being told to memorize lies in school, as I've been over numerous times before with ample evidence that that's the case. Or again, they never figure it out, which should prove to people again that brainwashing is very real. The American school system is a CIA brainwashing apparatus designed to brainwash those who attend and those who work within and keep that grip around their throat for as long as they live, which of course leads to depopulation and a shortened lifespan. Think COVID shots, among other things. Just going through your entire life believing something that never actually happened. So yeah, I'm against merit pay. Because in the business of fraud, which is again what American public schools are, you can't possibly do that ethically, equally, or soundly. Not under any parameter whatsoever, regardless of the rubric that is used. It opens itself too much for fraud because there's already fraud in the business from a test-taking standpoint. School teachers, counselors, you name it, administrators will fill out standardized test forms for students and help them answer questions correctly to make it look like their school is succeeding or that child is succeeding or that teacher is succeeding when in fact they aren't. There was a teacher in the high school where I used to work. He should have been fired for this, if not brought up on criminal charges, and neither happened. He sat down with at least one, if not more, of his special education students and went through the entire Florida FCAT exam, which is their state standardized test, and helped them answer all of the questions. That's not the way it's supposed to go. But that's what he did. And then, of course, he screamed foul and said, well, I was just, accommodating their IEPs and 504s, and that's what... No, he was giving them answers. And he got caught. Because other students went home and complained to their parents, he's giving out answers, and they went, what? And then they made a giant fuss about it. He got his wrist slapped, and then he was back on the job in no time. Endless schools in the state of Ohio and all across the United States have done the exact same thing because they know that the more positive test scores come out, the more money they receive from the state. At least it used to work that way. Who's to say what'll happen in the future? But if you open up merit pay for teachers, you're opening the floodgates for fraud. And I do not support fraud in the slightest. They also, again, in their presentation, brought up the fact that they continuously still use what they call brave bucks. This is like the Eagle Buck fiasco that I brought up a number of years ago, of course, that was directly related to my whistleblowing of students being abused. That these Eagle Bucks were being used by students as an underground form of currency for students to cheat on one another, sexually harass one another, and it's completely unethical. That you're giving them monopoly money, and then, of course, telling them that you can or cannot attend said activity if you don't have enough of this monopoly money, which is directly tied to grade distribution, so-called achievement, quote unquote, and then, of course, just being a good person. But as we know, that's completely subjective. And they openly admitted, again, to pulling students into their offices as administrators and openly saying, as this one elementary school principal openly did, and openly saying, well, we decided to give them more brave bucks because we thought that they were, not being given enough, or they had done a good deed and they came into our office and asked if they could have more brave bucks. No student in an American school should be approaching an administrator asking for monopoly money under any circumstance whatsoever. See, now I'm going to get pissed because this bothers me because it's child abuse. And yes, it is child abuse. You're teaching children that doing well for the sake of doing well isn't good enough. So you fake monetize their so-called success with fake money to again buy stationery, pencils, or go on a field trip, or go on some useless activity within the actual school. I view this as child abuse. And what a horrible lesson you're teaching American children. Don't say they're not brainwashed, ladies and gentlemen, and don't say it's not a CIA operation. It most certainly is. The paperwork proves it. The white papers are out there. It openly proves it. We're going to shape the minds of these individuals. It's going to be communistic, and everybody's going to do it because we say so. And now this monopoly money program, of course, has been and still is nationwide. It falls under the umbrella of what is called PBIS, Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. There's also an equally useless game that gets played within this particular district and school buildings alike called the PAX Interventions or PAX Good Behavior game. This is also stupid. This is where you have students engaging in useless games like Flip Cup, that if they do well or finish an assignment within a particular time parameter, that they can sit around and just play Flip Cup all day long, or for a certain amount of time while they take a break from learning. It's daycare. I don't know what else to say. It's just daycare. And it takes daycare workers to manage all of this and allow it to happen. And on top of this, of course, in their useless presentations, what were they doing? They were openly saying that once they achieved a certain grade or once they achieved a certain amount of brave bucks, so to speak, they then took a picture and actually highlighted this like it was a good thing, where they showed students walking outside of the school onto the school property in the snow on their way to look for Bigfoot. That this was some activity. Go out into the snowfield and along the wood line and let's go look for Bigfoot. Your tax dollars at work, ladies and gentlemen. This is the problem. This is the dumbing down of America at face value. Which now leads me, of course, to the last meeting which took place on Wednesday evening. This particular meeting was particularly hilarious. I have audio to play from it, as one might expect, and at the exact same time, I'm going to set the table here by refreshing everybody regarding this particular story. Many months ago, it's almost too long for me to even remember. I want to say, November or December, somewhere around there. A number of individuals, again, were reaching out to the husband of a board member. Now, the ethical board member who sits on the board, her name is Dawn King. Dawn King was elected overwhelmingly by the people of this town and the people in this district as a former graduate of the school district herself and a graduate of Miami University to, again, show up on the board and ask questions that have never been asked. I've played audio of her before on the show. Again, she's remarkably ethically sound. She knows exactly what she's doing, and as you would expect, when you stir the pot of hell, all the demons start to scream. Because they have no other recourse. That's all they can do is just scream, shout, threaten people, and 1,000 other things. So what this particular meeting had to do with, was attempting to discipline Dawn King for her handling of information that was public to every single public employee in the district, including all the staff members, the superintendent, the IT director, the treasurer, every special education liaison, every building administrator, parents, and students. And it had to do with their misuse of a Google platform, specifically Google Calendar, and not making sure that that particular technological platform was turned off to ensure the basically anonymity, so to speak, of particular documentation, specifically IEPs, 504s, addresses, phone numbers, you name it. Keeping in mind, of course, that in this town, during a past election before a levy failed, members of the community, in partnership with the school district, and the treasurer specifically of the school district, Shauna Tafowski, obtained the names and addresses of every single child and parent who is affiliated with the district in an effort to group mail all of them in the snail mail, in their mailboxes, information about who they should vote for school board and that they should vote for the levy. All of that information was illegally obtained because you can't do that as a school district. You cannot give out the addresses to a public member of the public, whether they be a parent with children in the district or not, to every single individual or anybody who requests it, and then, of course, cover that up, which they did a very poor job of doing. To then again have everybody's mailboxes at the end of their driveways with some flyer in it, again, that says who they should vote for and make sure you vote for the levy because the kids of this district depend on it and blah, blah, blah. So when it comes to an ethical pissing contest regarding Talawanda City Schools in the town where I live, they lose every time. They're the most immoral that you could possibly imagine. So let's review just a few things from the recent past. The school district and school board preceding Don King's time on the school board, they openly covered up the abuse of a male business teacher at the middle school toward female students over the course of numerous years, including building administration at the time. That's number one. They let him resign after a Title IX investigation where allegedly the school district decided to take the stance that all of the girls were lying. That all of the girls who were claiming that there was abuse or that he was inappropriately touching them, that they must have all have been lying. So that's the school board. That's the superintendent, Ed Thoreau. Keep this in mind as I continue to unroll this. As time goes on, they continue, of course, to use bullying, harassment, and every other tactic that every other school district across the United States uses. Why do they use these tactics against people who, of course, have caught them in illegality, breaking their codes of conduct and wrongdoing? Simple. They do it because it is a part of human resource development, or human resource department, rather, and their playbook. It's quite literally human resource policy to use intimidation as a factor against employees when the higher-ups get caught doing something that they're not supposed to be doing. In particular, if it refers to, of course, breaking the law. And as I've said before also, local police departments and resource officers, by and large, are completely useless because they work on behalf of the school district, not on behalf of parents or abused children. In particular, of course, if parents are being lied to and abused and gaslit, and so are the students themselves, the police aren't interested in that. They're only interested in protecting their own image, their own employment, and the image and employment of course, the higher-ups within the school district. I wrote about that in my first, second, and probably third and fourth book, dating back to 2017. Ample evidence proves this to be the case. Endless white papers on these various topics, no doubt about it. Anybody can look this up. It's a long history of corruption. Not just within this school district, of course, but within numerous school districts. And then, of course, again, when any concerned citizen would come up to the microphone during a board meeting and warn them about something that they were doing that they shouldn't be doing, what do? Instead of acknowledging wrongdoing and then thanking the individuals for bringing it to their attention, they deflect blame. This, of course, is called psychological projection. They don't know that that's an actual phrase. They don't know that that's an actual thing that human beings do, and that endless books and white papers have been written about that. That it's an actual characteristic in DSM-5. That those who scream the loudest have the most to hide. And that when people do that publicly, and they again deflect blame onto other people for wrongdoing that they themselves did, they're actually exposing themselves, believe it or not, certainly to the more knowledgeable. But they actually think, sadly, that they're passing one over on the gullible. And sometimes they get away with that, and sometimes they don't. Again, this was also very famously the school district, both pre-election and post-election meltdown, that decided to completely support and back a high school language arts teacher by the name of Danielle Mann, rather famous for her meltdown, completely showing, of course, that she's certifiable and that she belongs in a padded room. Now, again, the irony of that is that every American classroom is a padded room, metaphorically. Even so, they maintained her employment, and they've kept her on. I've heard a whole lot of nasty rumors about her too, which I'm not going to get into, but they're terrible. And yes, she should have been fired, and this goes way beyond her losing her mind on TikTok videos showing that she's a complete NPC tool and has no business being around minors for a variety of reasons. But even so, this is exactly who they protect. It's rules for thee, not for me. That's their approach. That's their policy, because theoretically, that's HR policy. That's the way it operates. They always say the same things out of one side of their mouth, and then they operate completely different on the other. They say, see something, say something. But when you do that, if they don't like what's being said or being shown, they panic. And then they psychologically project, and they engage in the old Saul Alinsky playbook, which is blame everybody for the thing that we ourselves are guilty for or guilty of. It's communism. And it actually dates back again to the Bolshevik Revolution. These were tactics that were created by the Jewish lobby all the way back then to subvert innocent individuals and, of course, uproot government and turn them into communist institutions. That's why it's HR policy across the board in American schools. This is why they're criminal organizations, because this is how they behave. So again, regarding all of that, specifically regarding, again, Danielle Mann, the abusive teacher, and endless other examples, the codes of conduct, which there are 10 of them, were violated by numerous school employees, including the superintendent. That brings me now to their misuse and adoption of Google Calendar. Their Google Calendar adoption is their own fault. That's number one. Because school districts are notorious for adopting technology that they don't even know how to use. Why? Because they receive some kind of financial kickback, or it becomes a checkbox that they get to mark on some evaluation showing a state official that we use this particular toy or this technological application. Therefore, we are hip to the jive. We're up to date. We are the cat's pajamas. We're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Yes, we don't know how to use it, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that it exists and falls under our umbrella, and we have this on all of our paperwork, and we use it and encourage people to use it, and so on and so on. Now, the problem with Google Calendars that they found out the hard way is that since 2018, at least I believe, at least that's my generic knowledge of how long they've had this in place, that at the very least, they've had this as an adopted technological platform, and yet they've left open the ability for anybody who has a district email or login to access anybody else's personal information or personal schedules or calendars or IEPs and 504s across the entire district. So let me ask just one very basic question here. Who do you think is ultimately legally responsible for making sure that that never happens? What district employee is responsible for proposing the use of the technological piece and platform and application, thereby being legally responsible for knowing how to operate it ethically and soundly? Of all of the school employees, it falls on the shoulders of one person, the superintendent. That's it. The superintendent is the one who is responsible for delivering professional development. Certainly depending on the size of the district. In larger districts, they would have their own professional development coordinator. However, in smaller districts, this always falls on the superintendent, as is the case here. And of course, the IT director, because your IT director would have to be completely batshit stupid in order to adopt a Google platform and not know how to keep private information private. On top of that, just as a quick reminder to everybody, if you're using Google, nothing is private. Which means if you're taking private legal documentation of minors, like IEPs and 504s, and you're putting it online on a Google platform, that means it's on somebody else's computer. Google's computer, because that's what the cloud is. A cloud is just someone else's computer. And in this case, regarding Google, all of that information is available in California, if you're an Ohio student or wherever that student exists. It also exists in endless foreign countries like China and Pakistan and India, because that's where Google operates. So no, there's no such thing as privacy on the internet. That's not how it works. And no parent with a brain in their skull would allow legal documentation of their child to be on the internet under any circumstance. Now let's get in a time machine and go back in time very quickly. Remember back in the day in the main office of the school building, wherever you attended, if you attended a public school or a private school, they would have giant filing cabinets that were fireproof. And inside of those filing cabinets were the folders of particular children with particular documentation, albeit back then, very few documentation, because more kids these days, students, quote unquote, are, falsely categorized as being retarded when in fact they're not. They're falsely categorized as being special education when they aren't. But their parents are determined to get them on all this paperwork, which magically disappears the moment they graduate. Whoops. Now they're back with the regular population of human beings on planet Earth, because all of that special education nonsense doesn't have any weight in real society. Only within a K12 school district, where they control everybody. Control what they read, what they do, what they can and cannot say or do, where they can go, etc., etc. That's how it used to work back in the day. That's not how it works now. All of it's digitized. And they actually are foolish enough to believe that it's actually private. It isn't. Not when you don't have the particular parameters of the application that you've adopted that you don't know how to use within your entire district, and that information is widely available to every single school employee, which, by the way, that information should have been caught by every single school employee, specifically building administrators, special education teachers, special education liaisons, the IT director, and the superintendent of the district, Ed Thoreau. But none of them caught it. None of them. Which means, what the hell y'all doing? What are you all doing? So a bunch of parents in the district apparently, again, reached out to Scotty King, who is the husband of one of the board members. Why did they reach out to him? Simple. Because Dawn King was told that she wasn't allowed to have contact and that parents weren't allowed to have contact with her as a board member, which was also proven later to be a lie, that Ed Thoreau told everybody was supposed to be the case. And then, of course, Dawn King found out through lawyers that that is a complete and utter lie. Because of course it's a lie. She's an elected official. Any individual can reach out to her with a concern, and she should bring it to the public's attention. Because that's called, quote unquote, transparency. Their favorite word that they love to use, but they hate to apply. So again, numerous parents figured out, very simply, that their children's information and all children's and all staff information was widely available on Google Calendar because the superintendent and the IT director didn't turn off all of the parameters upon adoption of the program to keep that information private, so they think. So some screenshots of things got shared, and the only thing that was really exposed was the name of a parent. And one particular, I don't even remember what it was, one particular calendar note that was made by the superintendent and maybe one other meeting that was taking place. That was it. It was all very benign nonsense. No student names were revealed. No addresses were revealed. No phone numbers. Just the spelling of a couple of adults. That's basically it. That's all that was revealed. So as a result of all of that being exposed, of course, and people being told how that information was easily accessible, other parents took to the internet and verified it and said, holy shit, what is this school district doing? How on earth, since 2018 or whenever it is that they adopted Google Calendar and all these Google platforms, have they been allowing this to take place and not know it? That's an awfully long time to be really stupid about something that you've adopted. But then again, this falls into, of course, their pattern of behavior, because if the same thing happens more than once for the retards in the back, that's called a pattern. And as a result, the public, of course, found this out and didn't like it. So now what? Well, now what they decided to do was place the blame on the ethical board member Don King, who in part found all of this out, just like the rest of the public found all of this out. So they had a special session in the last meeting, took her behind closed doors, slapped her wrist, came back out, and ultimately ended up saying, or at least one of the many unethical board members, Patrick Mead, who, by the way, if you're, I came across this very funny post. It was by John Rich on X. He openly said, of course, that students don't know how to write in cursive anymore, and they don't know how to read cursive because they aren't taught cursive. Neither does Pat Mead, who, by the way, again, is a board member and is retired from the actual school district itself as a special education teacher, if memory serves, or something along those lines. Either way, he doesn't even know how to write in cursive, because I've seen his signature on documentation, and he quite literally prints his signature. And here's how he does it. He writes it Mr. Mead in lowercase letters. He apparently doesn't understand what the word signature means, which means you have to sign your name in script, which is cursive. So this is a sitting board member who doesn't know how to write his signature and his name in cursive. I mean, Jesus Christ. I know some people would think that's superficial, but come on. Anyway, moving on. They came back from executive session, and Pat Mead asked and called for the resignation of Don King. And she, of course, denied that and said, no, I can't be harassed. I can't be bullied. I'll play all the audio of this here in just a second. The school board, in their typical, again, hubris and self-exposure and psychological projection and digging their own grave, they even invited the Cincinnati news outlet Fox 19 to show up and report on the issue. This is the same Fox 19 news outlet that has reported negatively about the entire board regarding their previous actions for all the things that I just previously brought up. Danielle Mann, a sexually abusive and assaulting business teacher at the middle school, covering all of that up, etc., etc. Now they think what? They're going to use the local news outlet in Cincinnati to paint them in a nice picture? You have to be kidding me. The double standard here is astounding, but as we know, if it weren't for double standards, they'd have no standards at all. And then they made a motion again to censure her and keep her basically from speaking or doing anything, and it didn't even get a second motion. Because they're foolish enough to probably think that they're actually going to get some criminal referral for some illegal wrongdoing. Well, joke's on them, because I have some lawyer friends, a great deal of them as a matter of fact, and I very basically asked them, who's legally responsible for all of this? Who's legally responsible for appropriately maintaining the technology and the options within said technology to maintain the privacy of students, specifically minors, specifically related to those who have IEPs or 504s? Now, you know what the answer is because you're smart people. And I'm going to read that legal explanation here in just a little bit. But first, let me allow these individuals to put their own feet in their own mouths and expose themselves even more than they already have. Again, you give these people an inch, they'll hang themselves with it. Here's the first person who speaks in the public comments section of this board meeting after they came back from executive session. This particular individual is named Molly Farler. This particular individual, among others I assume, had a screenshot of what was apparently a 504 and IEP form with just her name on it as a parent. And that, again, was making the rounds on a local Facebook page. It was sent to me among endless other people. I put it out there also and said, apparently people have access to this kind of stuff. Seems like something that the school district should know about. Seems like they should fix this. And of course, that very evening, when Scott King came up to the microphone and said, your Google Calendar is open. Everybody can see this. Endless parents and students and staff members can see everybody's information. You need to shut this down now. What they should have done as a board but didn't was immediately adjourn, go into executive session with the IT director, and shut it down. They didn't do that. They waited hours, even into the next day, and then sought to have a meeting with their staff members on how individual staff members could put individual privacy notifications on the Google Calendar and their Google platforms so that so-called not everybody could see their information who works within the district. But again, rumor has it that some of these particular parameters are still open depending on what you click on. Again, this is how stupid these people are. But Molly Farler and her husband come up to the microphone and she speaks because apparently she wears the pants in the relationship. And she openly says with a big shit-eating grin on her face that nothing is ever hidden and people will be exposed and nothing is ever private and blah, blah, blah. You're also going to hear her say something right at the very start regarding all of her children. She openly admits that all of her children are on IEPs or 504s or both. She openly tells everybody this. So a little tip to parents. If you don't want if you don't want the entire internet and the world knowing that your children are on IEPs or 504s, stop fucking talking about it. Don't bring it up. Don't walk up to a microphone in a school board meeting and tell everybody that your kids are paperwork handicapped, which is a phrase I like to use because they're probably not handicapped at all. They just have paperwork that says so. Because, again, parents and teachers and building administrators love making excuses as to why children don't succeed, so to speak, or achieve their full potential. But she has no qualms about coming up again to the microphone and openly saying that her kids receive all these special services, which is direct indication that her children are on IEPs and 504s, which means it's not private. You just told everybody. Again, these people, you give them an inch, like they'll just drown themselves. I mean, it's the old meme of the person again who's, on their knees in 1 foot of water screaming that they're drowning. Just stand up. You're not drowning, number one, but just stand up and walk out of the water. And they don't even do it. She just got embarrassed online, apparently by a bunch of teachers or a bunch of parents or other community members who don't like her because apparently this woman has a history of running her mouth. Again, she's a libtard. She's as far left as you could probably imagine. I don't even know the woman. I've never even met her. Hell, I've never even seen her. This is my first time even seeing her on this YouTube video. But either way, give her a listen. In 3, 2, 1.
Hello, Molly and Andy Farler. We are residents of Oxford Township. We have 3 boys who have attended Talawanda School District since preschool. They've attended Kramer, Marshall, the middle school, and the high school. Over the last 12 years of our children attending Talawanda schools, we have had amazing teachers, intervention specialists, educational assistants, administrators, staff, and community support. I could literally spend hours talking about our positive experiences with the Talawanda School District and the success of our children as a result of the support and love they have received at Talawanda. But that's not why we are here this evening. During the public comment section of the December 2024 board meeting, Scotty King spoke to the board and the audience about a security issue with Talawanda's Google Calendars. At the time, Sean Brooks posted in a Facebook group the instructions for how to access those calendars. He also included screenshots of our son's IEP, the calendar event for our son's IEP meeting, and other calendar events. Sean Brooks does not have any children at Talawanda. He did not personally have the ability to access the calendars or take screenshots. Those events have been under investigation for the last 3 months to determine who accessed those records and gave them to Sean Brooks to share. We want to know the results of that investigation. I think every person in this room wants to know the results of that investigation. That is why we are here tonight. We read many comments from people online who are demanding transparency and accountability from the Talawanda School District and the Board of Education. And that is exactly what we are asking for tonight. We also want the results of the investigation to be released publicly to be a deterrent to anyone else who might consider doing this to us or anyone else in the future. We want anyone else who comes across private and federally protected information or sensitive information to carefully consider the ramifications of sharing it publicly. Everything is traceable. There is no anonymity when it comes to sharing protected data. Again, thank you to each person who reached out to us to support us. Many of them are in this audience this evening. We have felt very supported by our community and almost every person on that stage. Thank you.
Again, the irony is palpable. She claims it again at the end that she's supported by everybody on that stage, almost everybody, implying, of course, that Dawn King is the only person who doesn't somehow support her. Support her regarding what? The superintendent is the one responsible for knowing how to use the technology. Nobody else. I mean, yes, other people are, specifically school-level employees within the actual buildings themselves, which, as I said, nobody caught. None of those employees caught any of this. It took parents and students to figure out, apparently, endless parents and endless students, to figure out that this was in fact the case. And again, there was no IEP shared. It was a form that had Molly Farler's name on it. So what did anybody learn? That Molly Farler didn't just publicly disclose or hasn't publicly disclosed previously. Nothing, just the spelling of her name. That's it. So again, people associated with the district, unless of course they're child traffickers or something along those lines, which I don't have any evidence that they are. What would they do with such information? Why would people rifle through information like that, which again, I don't even have access to? Why would they rifle through information like that looking for specifics for any particular reason? They wouldn't. It could be, again, that Molly Farler just ran her mouth too much because, again, she just told everybody that her kids are on IEPs and 504s, but she's apparently done that online with regularity for a very long time. And that's not secret. That apparently isn't new. Certainly not among employees or people who know her. So yeah, I mean, she's right. I don't have access to that information. But you know who did, Molly? Everybody. All the school employees, including the superintendent. Every single student, every parent, every employee, all of them. The IT director, you name it. Anybody, anyway, I suppose, who uses a Google Calendar, which I've never even used. I hate Google. I mean, I've openly said it time and time again. If you're using anything Google in an American school or even in your personal life, like, I'm sorry, I kind of feel bad for you because it's not a good search engine. It's not a good platform. And like I said, it isn't private. It's on the cloud, which is just somebody else's computer. So again, I don't even know what was embarrassing about any of it, other than the fact that your name was on a form and now people know how to spell your name, I guess. So no, there's not any criminal investigation. There's not any whatever. Because if there were, it backs up on specifically the superintendent, which now, of course, leads me to my lawyer friends. Here's what they responded when I asked them, again, who is legally responsible for maintaining this technology and this information and all of the parameters associated with it in a school district. Certainly in the state of Ohio regarding, of course, Ohio law. The smart people in the crowd know the answer to this, but the dummies might want to put on their listening caps, or their listening ears and their thinking caps, rather. It says the following here. This was the response. Sean, in Ohio, the legal responsibility for ensuring the privacy of a student's individualized education program, IEP, in Section 504 plan information primarily falls on the school district, as they are the entity directly responsible for managing and safeguarding student records. School district, not the school board. School district, employees. This obligation, it says, stems from federal law, including the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, which protects the confidentiality of student education records, and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, which imposes specific privacy requirements for students with IEPs. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 also aligns with these privacy expectations by prohibiting discrimination and requiring reasonable safeguards for student information. Keep listening. It gets worse for the district, specifically Ed Thoreau, and every building administrator. So keep listening. When a school district adopts technology tools like Google Workspace for education to manage IEPs and 504 data, it remains the district's responsibility to ensure these tools are used in a way that complies with privacy laws. This includes configuring the tools correctly, training staff on their use, and establishing policies to prevent unauthorized access or disclosure. The district must also enter into agreements with third-party providers like Google to ensure they meet FERPA and IDEA standards, which are not using student data for purposes beyond what the district authorizes. That's crystal flipping clear. They went on. They said if the district fails to protect this information, say due to a misconfiguration of Google's systems, inadequate staff training, or a lack of oversight, the school district itself is typically held accountable. Federal agencies like the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, OCR, or the Family Policy Compliance Office, now the Student Privacy Policy Office, can investigate breaches and impose consequences such as requiring corrective action or, in extreme cases, withholding federal funds. Who are the licensed people in the district responsible for the adoption of this technology again? That's right, the superintendent, Ed Thoreau. Whoops-a-daisy. Parents could also pursue legal action against the district for damages if a breach causes harm, though liability often depends on proving negligence or willful disregard. So, just to cut in, if I was a parent, not Molly Farler, although she could join this if she wanted to, because she thinks that there's sides in this debate, I guess. If I was a parent and I had children in the district, of course they wouldn't be on IEPs or any of that nonsense, not to mention I wouldn't even send them. But even so, hypothetically, if they were, and this had happened, I'd sue the district in a class action lawsuit, specifically Ed Thoreau. Why? Because he was the one who authorized the use of the technology while not knowing how to use it. That's his problem. And what are they doing? They're blaming, quite literally, the school board member who brought this to their attention, and her husband who brought this to their attention. And theoretically, they're blaming every parent in the district who knew that this was going on and bringing this to the public's attention. You're blaming the wrong people. It's beyond obvious. You're blaming the wrong people, legally speaking. It goes on, again, because clearly there was negligence and a willful disregard. How long have they had the program in place? That's how long they've been neglectful, using the particular tool. It says Google or other tech providers are generally not directly liable under FERPA or IDEA unless they act outside the scope of their contract with the district, for example, misusing data for advertising. It says their role is usually limited to following the district's instructions as a school official under FERPA, quote unquote, provided the district has a proper agreement in place. I wonder if Talawanda School District has a legal proper agreement in place regarding Google. My guess is they don't. However, if the provider's tool has inherent security flaws that the district couldn't reasonably mitigate, responsibility might be contested in court with Google, but the district still bears the initial burden of choosing a compliant vendor, which means it's Ed Thoreau's fault. It's the IT department's fault. It's their professional development fault. It's their fault. Ultimately, the school districts, this is the kicker, administration, superintendents, special education directors, and IT staff holds the legal and practical duty to ensure privacy. They can't just point fingers at Google or the public because they're the ones answerable to parents, students, and federal regulators if something goes wrong. Unquote. Whoops. Good luck with your criminal investigation. All it's going to do is go right back onto Edward Thoreau. Those who scream the loudest have the most to hide. Those who psychologically project have the most to hide. Let that sink in for a minute. Again, if she is curious, this Molly Farler, if she thinks that she was somehow embarrassed, well, whatever. Congratulations, everybody knows how to spell your name now. I don't know why that's embarrassing. The fact is that it's not about you. It's about a negligent school district who doesn't know what they're doing, and they got caught. And they've been caught, again, regarding numerous things, time and time again. Not to mention, like I just said earlier, at the beginning of all of this, you openly admitted in your opening statement, Molly Farler, that your children are on IEPs or 504s publicly. You've done it before this Google nonsense. You've done it during, and you've now done it after on the record on the internet. Openly saying again that your children have been receiving all of these special services. Those are only available to IEP or 504 holders. Everybody knows that with a brain. So, again, stop making your private business public. That's a little tip, but whatever. You don't have to take my advice. Now here's Scott King, because Scott King comes up to the microphone right afterwards, and he exposes Ed Thoreau as being a liar. Now let me mention this publicly also. Again, it ties back to a number of different things I've brought up in the past. The previous board member who resigned, who's no longer on the board, resigned because he was afraid that I was going to come up to the microphone and tell the truth about what his adopted son was doing to female students and how the district was covering it up. Physically assaulting them, threatening to kill them, and then, of course, sending pornographic material to them online without their consent. And the entire district, not Don King, and not the new guy, of course, who took David Both's position, because, of course, he wasn't even there. But all of that was happening at the direction and with the direction of the superintendent also, violating at least 7 out of the 10 codes of conduct at the state level, while screaming again out of the other side of their mouth that the safety and security of students is their number one concern. This also, of course, led him to implement what he calls, the superintendent anyway, in-school assignment. In-school assignment is not in-school suspension. Only in-school suspension is legally recognized by the state of Ohio, not in-school assignment. So in Thursday's board meeting, last Thursday, a week ago, Ed Thoreau openly says in the meeting, once confronted by Scott King about in-school assignment, what it really means, and how he contacted the State Department of Education, where they openly told him, probably in writing I would assume also, that there's no such thing as in-school assignment, that it doesn't exist, that the State Department of Education doesn't recognize that as even being a thing. As it turns out, David Both's son, adopted son, received at least 60 days, approximately, from what I hear, allegedly, 60 days of in-school assignment, not in-school suspension. Because if certain numbers of in-school suspension reach a particular level, they have to recommend expulsion. But they weren't going to do that for a board member's adopted son. Now, everybody, again, with 2 cents in their head knows full well that as a sitting board member, you cannot favor a family member. In particular, if said family member attends that school district. And yet that's exactly what happened. You see, it's not that these individuals and school board members are sad that they're breaking the law or sad that they're violating their codes of conduct and breach of contract. They're not regretful for any of that. They're upset and yelling and screaming because they got caught. It's that simple, which means these people are incapable of accepting wrongdoing and accepting responsibility for their own actions. So again, at the end of last Thursday's board meeting, Scott openly asked the question when he came up to the microphone, how long ISA has been around. Because he wanted to know, how long has in-school assignment been a pseudo name being used to skirt the ISS documentation, which, let's face it, that gets deleted all the time by American school districts across the board all the time too. Hell, it happened when I taught school. Same thing. Administrators would do it all the time. A school teacher fills out an in-school suspension report and the child never ends up in in-school suspension. They find their way into a administrator's office. They sit there for a couple of hours and then they're back in class. Again, it's fraud because it's cooking the books. You're hiding the real numbers, just like the way that school districts across the nation hide bullying numbers. Well, we had all these bullying reports, but we investigated them and none of them turned out to actually be bullying. Horseshit. Who believes that? No one believes that. It's fraud, and it's not new. It's not new fraud. This is an old practice. Like I said, human resource department policy. This is This is what it is. There are very bad people who work in this business who do this kind of thing. So, I digress, but at the end of that meeting, Ed Thoreau, the superintendent, openly says in public, sort of like, I'm getting the last word. He openly says that in-school assignment has been around before he even showed up as superintendent. He's been the superintendent for approximately 7 years. Now what you're going to hear in Wednesday night's meeting is Scott King call him out for being a liar. Why? Because number one, he's a liar. And number two, Scott King open records requested how long in-school assignment has been around. And it's only been around for approximately 3 years, the exact amount of time that Ed Thoreau has been the superintendent. Coincidence? I think not. It also dates back again to the abuse of David Botha's adopted son toward female students, which, by the way, if you don't believe that that happened, all you have to do is either talk to the previous middle school principal, last name Derrickson, or better yet, you could FOIA request Butler County District Court proceedings, and you'll get all you can flip and handle. So here's Scott King in 3, 2, 1.
Scotty King, our town. I get it. No one enjoys or likes being caught with their zipper down. Most people would prefer to be told that they're exposed and walk around for another decade like that. In light of this, I respectfully suggest that the school board assess the superintendent's capacity to appoint individuals who possess not only the loyalty to the superintendent, but also unwavering integrity, which is not the case. Furthermore, it's imperative that a whistleblower is to be safeguarded from attacks and retaliation rather than being penalized for the courage of coming forward. I brought numerous violations to your attention, yet I regret none that appropriate actions have been taken. First infraction, which involved the granting the Vote Yes community access to copying the student directory. The second, violation pertaining to ledgers containing sensitive information about students' disability and personal details. The third, the Google Calendar, which was left accessible to anyone with a Talawanda organization and the public. Fourth, 2 months after the December meeting, which I did say, in February, in February, this was after the district supposedly addressed the issue. I was informed by a former parent, not a Talawanda org email parent, who reached out regarding to see another kid's IEP on her personal calendar, asserting that the calendars remained open under certain conditions, still to this day. So, based on the list of people that was speaking, tonight's the focus is going to be on not how to fix the issue, but to complain about who potentially viewed it or is trying to fix it. I'm amazed how the district's leadership can't accept their own fault. And this is fresh off the press. I just received it at 7:01 for an IEP or for public records request last meeting, where Ed said the ISA was in place before him. Based on the public records request Shauna just sent me, it's only been in place 3.5 years. I think you've been here longer than 3.5 years. Correct me if I'm wrong. And not to mention, thank you for letting me know that we sent our principal at Bogan to Hawaii for a personal development trip. Thank you.
Right, moving on.
Again, whoops, just like that. Just like that. They get exposed yet again. They're pathological liars. Again, it blows me away. You can't say brainwashing isn't real. You can't say that. It's 100% real. Only a brainwashed individual would send their child to a school district like that when a superintendent and a board consistently lie. And everybody's worried about their mortgage payment, so everybody just licks the boots and bends the knee. Certainly at the building level. It's completely ridiculous. And of course, if you stand up to their wrongdoing, you get shown the door, which is exactly what happened to Principal Derrickson at the middle school. He didn't like the fact that he was being told and strong-armed to put David Botha's adopted son in school assignment, which again is a made-up categorization. Because if it was your child or my child or any other child, they'd probably be, again, shown the door and expelled. And as you heard even Scott King say there at the end, they sent one of their new principals of one of the elementary schools to Hawaii for professional development. That cost the district thousands of dollars. Are you saying there's no online professional development that exists, let alone anywhere else? They do this in an effort to control people. Well, we sent you to Hawaii for professional development. You owe us. This is what criminal organizations do. This is how they behave. And of course, the reason that they don't like me is because of this show. They don't like the fact is actually infrequently as I talk about them, which is remarkably infrequent. But that when I do, I expose them for who they are. But what they don't understand is that they expose themselves for what they do all of the time with their own actions and their own words. They would have done well to keep all of this very quiet. But all you have are different categories of knowledgeable people and unknowledgeable people in the citizenry who know what's going on. Again, school teachers could come up to the microphone and complain about what's going on regarding this Google nonsense, but they aren't because they're wrapped up in it too. They were so stupid that they didn't even know what was available and what was not private, and that anybody could see anybody else's information. This is the issue here. And that's, of course, again, the double standard. They'll show up to the microphone and lick the boots of the board members and the superintendent, as if to say, I'm a teacher so-and-so in this classroom, and I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, and here's why. And then embarrass themselves in the process more so than they already have, or they could come up with a real concern and say, this is concerning. As an employee of this school district, I'm concerned that it's not being run properly. But they're not going to say that to a superintendent's face. They'll get fired. What they don't understand is there are anti-retribution laws, or retribution laws, so to speak, that exist in the state of Ohio. That if anybody is targeted in the state of Ohio from an employer for something that they do or say publicly, to bring about, again, ethical attention to a serious issue in the workplace, your boss can't engage in retribution against you. Not legally anyway, which means you have legal recourse. But the building, not the building, the business itself is filled with cowards. It's a business that is run with intimidation. And speaking of intimidation, or the perception of intimidation, so thinks Pat Mead, let me play his audio now, and he's the board member, of course, who wants to deflect any knowing or wrongdoing on his part. And to be frank, again, this isn't necessarily the board's fault. This isn't any one board member's fault, to be legally accurate. The fault of this whole Google thing lies on the actual superintendent, the IT director, and building administrators. And certainly, as was legally referred to me, special education liaisons, teachers, etc., etc. It's their fault. They're the ones that are supposed to know. So here's Pat Mead again, attempting to take the moral high ground, which he doesn't because it's just quicksand as far as he's concerned and reality is concerned. And he, again, attends to slap the wrist of Dawn King, and then Dawn King again comes back and reads her statement, and she's 100% accurate. And then, of course, in typical harassing, bullying fashion, Pat Mead comes back when she makes a quick comment about how she has a prepared speech, and he says, well, I reserve the right to speak again after you speak. He's proving to everybody he's an asshole. So, what more proof do you need? I've used the example before. If this was a pizza parlor that was engaging in all of this behavior, you wouldn't send your children to the pizza parlor ever again. But people keep sending them. Parents send their children back to the same school building and school district where murders took place. Oxford, Michigan. Wrap your head around that. You can't say brainwashing isn't real. Here's Pat Mead and his infinite wisdom in 3, 2, 1.
Dawn, would you like to add anything?
I have a speech I want to read at the end. Yep.
Well, I'll give my speech now and then reserve the right to have a speech after your speech. Wow. So we have a member of our Talawanda School Board who knew December 8th, apparently, of a vulnerability that might put our staff's and students' privacy at risk. And as an elected member to the school board, where you took an oath of office to follow all the laws of the United States and the state of Ohio, you chose not to help the school deal with that security risk because you had some other purpose in mind. And I don't know if it's the same purpose that existed when you let out all the information about the physical security issues at Bogan and put students at risk. I don't know if it's the same issue that you've had at many other junctures in our meetings where you call for the termination of Dr. Thoreau. There's an agenda, and the agenda does not seem to be the safety, both physically and privacy-wise, of our students and our parents. And it's my belief no one should be on a school board if their agenda is not about the physical and safety of our students, their education, and is willing to support their privacy. You had a chance at that moment to call and say, there's an issue, Dr. Thoreau. The IT department needs to look at this. We need to fix it. After it was fixed, you could have come to a school board meeting and say, if it wasn't for me, Dr. Thoreau and the IT department wouldn't know what to do. We need to look into why it existed in the first place and how we can handle it and whether there should be accountability. That would have been the appropriate thing to do, but you did not, again, choose to do the appropriate thing. You chose to do the thing that fit your agenda, which I would say is different than a school board member's agenda ought to be. December 8th, you're accessing things. December 19th, your husband comes to the school board meeting and says, we have a problem. At the end of that meeting, you said this, Don, after your husband told us about this problem, and you've been accessing since December 8th, going into Dr. Thoreau's calendar, finding out things about people's IEP. Some of that showed up on the internet. Don't know if that's directly related to you or one of the other the student accounts. But you said at the end of the meeting, I also was just going to, I'm kind of confused about the email thing, the Google email data breach thing. What's going on with that? I don't know. Maybe that is something we need to look into. If people can actually access IEPs, student and employee information, what a disingenuous statement you made at the end of that meeting when all along you understood the Google Calendar situation. So how is the staff supposed to trust you as a school board member when they know you knew about this in advance and you give this fake innocence of, oh, what's going on? Woe is me. Something's wrong with the district. You talked a few meetings ago that Sean and Ed were liars and you couldn't trust them. Wow, okay. I'm still waiting for evidence of that, but you said I can't tell you that evidence because it's private. Okay. So Don, I'm thinking this is a serious violation, could get us sued, could cost the district money. It definitely hurt children, which crosses a line. It definitely violated the rights of children. And so, Don, what I would like, I hope your little speech is a resignation speech, because I would like you to resign so that we can move on in this district and find ethical people to do this job. Because what you did was unethical and it was immoral on every grounds. Now, I assume the 3 student accounts that will be following up with student discipline because they violated the student code of conduct. I assume we'll turn this over to law enforcement because my reading of some of the statutes is there is a crime involved here. And I assume that we'll find out if we have further vulnerabilities because we got another email from someone who works for a group of doctors, expert at IT and FERPA stuff, who then sent me screenshots of student IEP information, which is a FERPA violation. I'm sure her bosses would love to know that she can't even follow FERPA laws because there's things still going on. And we need to make sure we get to the bottom of that. But I think moving forward with a criminal investigation, with student discipline investigation, and then when Don resigns, finding a new board member. I'll give another speech when you're done, don't worry.
You're entitled to your opinion. Okay, well, guess I'll go next. Members of the board, colleagues, and anyone who still cares about decency, listen up because I've had enough. Far too long, I've been relentlessly harassed, targeted, and degraded by people who should know better, fellow board members and our so-called superintendent. This isn't a one-off spat or a petty disagreement. This is calculated, vicious campaign to intimidate me, break me down, and drive me out. And I'm here to say it stops now. Let's start with you, my esteemed board colleagues. You don't debate, you attack. You don't lead, you bully. And then there's the superintendent, supposed to be a professional and neutral overseer. What a joke. You've joined the pile-on twisted policies to silence me, dismissing my concerns and letting this toxic mess fester under your watch. This isn't just about her feelings. This is a pattern, sustained, deliberate, and malicious. I've endured sleepless nights, constant stress, and a barrage of hostility that no one should face in a professional setting. My contributions are drowned out by their venom, my reputation smeared by their cowardice, and for what? Because I dare to speak up. Because I won't bow to their fragile egos. This isn't leadership. This is a damn disgrace. I've tried reasoning, I've tried rising up. But when you're cornered by relentless aggression from people in power, you don't just take it, you fight back. You've created a hostile environment that's poisoned this board, and I'm done pretending it's business as usual. There needs to be accountability for the district Google calendars being open to everyone within talawanda.org, as well as, in some cases, the public. To my understanding, the superintendent has violated numerous policies by not securing our student and staff's personal information. Instead of holding this person accountable, the board and district have deflected the problem on me. I did not share this information, and this gaslighting has to stop. Either the board is unable to see the incompetence of our superintendent to the extent he is unhireable by other districts, or the board recognizes it, like the majority of the district, but lacks the ability, confidence, and leadership to act on it. Well, that's not me. I'm not willing to act on failure, especially when it's at the level of this and affecting so many children. That's a board's responsibility, and you are hiding from it. So here's the line in the sand. I'm not going anywhere. I'll keep showing up, keep speaking, and keep exposing this garbage for what it is. You've picked the wrong target because I'm not afraid of you. This ends when the harassment ends, and not a moment sooner. Thank you.
You didn't say much about your role in this. Was what you did okay, looking at student IEPs?
I don't have to comment on that.
No, you don't. Yes, this was calculated. We arranged for you to get into those calendars. It's amazing the power we have to arrange for her to violate student rights and then hold her accountable for it. I think there's been a violation of many policies, Don, and I hope that you can take responsibility for your role in that. And I think the only cowards here are people like John Adams, who can't even use his real name when he posts stuff about people. And you know who I'm talking about, John. Or the parents who use their student accounts to further their own agenda. Hopefully that comes out later. Or the people who anonymously post on websites about Dr. Thoreau's dog, who happens to be named Cuddles, veterinary clinic to try to embarrass him. But they do it anonymously. I think there are a lot of cowards out there, and it's kind of sad. But I think our job is to take care of the students in our care, to make sure we provide the staff with the resources they need to do a good job, and to be ethical and moral in our actions and transparent. I'm ashamed of nothing I've done. I would not claim that I'm a bully. I'm the person who is not afraid to stand up to the bullies. I know your husband, I believe, asked for my personnel records and my wife's. I'll take those risks in standing up against bullies. It's no problem. I know he called the Oxford police and claimed that I carry a gun to meetings. Little poor attempt at swatting. But I'll take those chances to stand up to bullies. If you want to disagree about Dr. Thoreau's performance, that's okay. Looking at students' IEPs and helping others accomplish the same thing is not okay. Period. Every week you can come and tell us how incompetent Dr. Thoreau is, or every month. That's okay. Looking at the private information of our students is not okay. I'm not asking you to resign because you don't like Dr. Thoreau or you think he's incompetent. I'm asking you to resign because you did something immoral, unethical, and violated the rights of our students. That's why I'm asking you to resign. I don't want it to be when the criminality comes out, we can vote you off, because we can't do that right now. You can be recalled, but we can't vote you off. I have no problem with you being against Dr. Thoreau. I have no problem with you voting differently on matters. I don't mind that at all. But you violated the rights of students. And I guess that's a badge of honor for you.
I'm going to leave it there. By the way, I'm John Adams. At least I was on Facebook a long time ago. And I was just on that group just so I could read what these idiots were saying, which, by the way, the superintendent also had an anonymous account by the name of John Damron. And so he would bounce in these groups and basically make fun of parents and anybody else who was criticizing the school district. Or if there was any wrongdoing going on that parents were discussing, he would criticize them. So, he's not the only one that had a pseudo-anonymous account. There were lots of people, and I assume still are. Again, I'm not on Facebook. I don't pay attention to any of it, so I don't know. But either way, my accounts got nuked because I was telling the truth. And I think I only made like 3 posts in total. But I was again suggesting exactly how school districts, or specifically parents, can file formal complaints against school district employees pertaining to their breaking the codes of conduct, along with, of course, going after their licensure. For, again, when codes of conduct or contracts are violated or even the law is broken. Of course, they don't want the public to know that kind of information because they have a lot to hide. Again, their response to people's responses gives away their guilt. Every single time. Dawn handled herself perfectly in that. She's 100% right. She's a whistleblower in this situation. It's very simple. Again, she was gathering information, not going through students' IEPs. Nobody does that because nobody gives a shit. Who cares? Nobody's, rifling through students' IEPs. They're simply saying, wait a minute, the district has a technology piece they don't know how to use. Let's verify this and make sure that they don't know how to use it and this is in fact accessible. Endless parents figured this out and brought this to the attention of the Kings, and the Kings told the district, you got a fucking problem here. And did they fix it? No. Because in that same meeting, Scott said under certain parameters, the information can still be accessible. They haven't learned anything. There isn't going to be any criminal referral against anybody. That's not what this was about. The only criminal referral, if there is one, is Ed Thoreau, the superintendent's inability to use a technology piece that he adopted. For what? 7 years? Something along those lines? What about every single building administrator who didn't know how to use it either? Again, listening to Pat Mead talk about ethics is like listening to Jeffrey Dahmer talk about being a good babysitter. It's completely ridiculous. And again, he talks about an agenda. Well, I know an agenda that Pat Mead had. Covering up, again, the physical abuse of female students at the hands of teachers and a school board members at the time, adopted son toward, again, female students. That was Pat's agenda. So, what now? What now is any investigation is going to point all and every finger back at Ed Thoreau, the IT department, and building administrators. So keep screaming. You can keep threatening all the people you want. It doesn't matter. This is your responsibility. This is why, again, home builders get sued all the time. And he even admitted it, by the way. I was going to make a metaphor there, but even Pat Mead admitted it. We could get sued over this. You could, because you should, by every single parent in the district. They should all sue you in a class action lawsuit. And they should demand the firing of Ed Thoreau as a part of that lawsuit and your removal from the board, along with the other board members who, again, didn't fix this problem. As I said earlier, the moment that this got brought to their attention publicly on the record in a board meeting was deliberate because they hide information. If this were emailed to them or somebody knocked on the district office and said, we need to talk, your Google platform sucks and you don't know how to use it, and all this information is apparently available to everybody associated with the district, they would bury that information. They would bury their negligence and cover it up. Because that's what a criminal organization does. That's kind of the problem, which is why whistleblowers exist. Me, of course, being one of them from many years ago. This is exactly how it works. And then in stereotypical fashion, what happens to the whistleblower? Well, it's very simple. All the enemies and all the individuals who engaged in the unethical behavior or illegal behavior turn all their guns against the whistleblower because that's their only defense. They're not going to accept responsibility. Ed Thoreau will never accept responsibility. It was his fault. But covering up for people like that, I mean, my God, it begs the old question, what's worse, the pedophile or the pedophile apologist? I would go so far as to say they're both equally as bad. But it's the old false equivalency also, which is what makes Pat Mead borderline retarded, because again, he doesn't know what that means. You can't have both parties be right. Somebody's wrong. And when the man stands up against the masses, it's the masses who are wrong. Certainly on that board. When everybody's thinking alike, somebody's not thinking. And Don King is the only one doing any thinking on that board right now. And that's been the case for a very long time. So it's just exhausting listening to these nitwits talk about, again, the safety of children and it hurt children and it harms children. No, it doesn't. It only harms the individual and the reputation of the people who are attempting to protect their reputation at all costs, which of course is Talawanda. And they don't even have a reputation. I mean, it's just dirt. It's a bucket of mud. This has been the case for decades. Endless people know this. This is, of course, as I've said in previous episodes, this is why school districts, K12 school districts, don't do longitudinal studies of teacher or building administration or district satisfaction for past graduates. They never do it because they'll never like the results. The results will overwhelmingly be negative. You didn't teach me anything that I needed to know for the real world. You let abuse and illegality take place. The list is endless of what actual previous students would bring up regarding school districts that they had previously attended. It's amazing. So yeah, You shine a light on these people and all the cockroaches come out, and they just, again, they don't stay quiet. They don't take the advice. They should take the advice and stay quiet. They should keep these things real quiet. Like bringing a gun to a board meeting. That's psychological projection, Patrick. Again, he can't spell psychological projection, let alone define it. Why on earth would he even bring that up? So Scott King calls the police to see if Pat Mead's carrying a loaded gun. Do you think that Scott King just sat around one day and made up a story about Pat Mead carrying a loaded gun in a school board meeting or in any district building just for funsies? Or has Pat Mead carried a loaded gun in a school board meeting or at least in other meetings taking place in other buildings before? I think we know the answer to that. It's a rather specified, allegation. It's also not swatting. He doesn't even know the definition of swatting. So for the retards in the back, swatting is when you're home and somebody claims that a crime is taking place in your home while you are there, like you're being kidnapped or you're being held at gunpoint inside the walls of your own home so that your home gets surrounded by police officers so that they don't know what's going on because they're, of course, operating on an anonymous call for something that isn't real. But that's not what this was. Pat Mead was getting called out, and he just called himself out because, again, you give them an inch, they'll hang themselves with it. He just called himself out for being a person who sits on a school board who has at least at one point apparently carried a loaded gun in a school board meeting or in another building. Whoops. Thanks for letting the whole public know, Pat, what you've done in the past. I wonder if he can spell the word felon. There's zero trust with the police department, zero trust with the school district, and zero trust with city council or anybody in this town. Why do people keep attending? Why do they keep going? And they'd better be real careful about retribution against students in the future. Because those parents need to pull their students out of this school district effective immediately. Immediately. There was no criminal wrongdoing. There was just a lot of stupidity on the part of the superintendent, the IT director, building administrators, again, and their inability to fix a problem, which allegedly still isn't even fixed. Again, people don't have to take my advice. They don't even have to listen to any of this. I don't care. The fact is that these environments are notoriously unsafe, and they're not going to get more unsafe. These people are digging in like ticks. They're deflecting responsibility regardless of where the school exists, regardless of what state it's in, and they're doubling down on dumb, because dumb is the only play they have. That's not a place I'd ever send a child. Not ever. But, brainwashing. It's always in play, and it's a very real thing. Couple of jab-related things for the jabbed in the audience, like the school district members potentially listening to this. Did you know that bone disintegration is a side effect of taking the COVID shots? Kim Carter, friend of the show, nurse friend as well of mine, openly discovered this with some of her patients. Full-blown bone disintegration. She described this, of course, on the record in one of the, war videos previously, where she, again, was describing the bone disintegration of a particular femur bone in a particular individual, which, of course, led to a rod being placed in their leg, in their thigh, to replace their femur bone, along with, of course, a full-blown hip replacement, not to mention other bone disintegration among other individuals as a result of all of that. There's also this, of course, more heart damage news and myocarditis news and scarring of the heart among the jabbed. After 5 COVID-19 mRNA booster shots, this was the human heart. This is what the human heart looks like, permanently damaged with fatal micro scars. This comes from the Heart Failure and Cardiomyopathies Journal, or the JACC journals. Again, a specific case report of scarring of a patient's heart who has received that many COVID shots. Yeah, because that's happening. Of course, school districts across the nation have no idea what they participated in, even though people are endlessly sick and 1,000 other things. But remember, responsibility. They don't want to accept responsibility. Let me end on a positive note. I found this story to be delightfully hilarious. This is from the Wall Street Journal. It's workplace related. This is actually classic. This is hilarious. Okay, this comes from a guy who used to work for Ford, the motor company. And the story here is titled, "The Ford Executive Who Kept Scores of Colleagues' Verbal Flubs." Again, this guy could be potentially my hero. It says the following here: Mike O'Brien kept a meticulous log of mixed metaphors and malaprops uttered in meetings over a decade. Quote, "Too many cooks in the soup," unquote. It says Mike O'Brien emailed a few hundred colleagues last month to announce his retirement after 32 years at Ford Motor. The sales executive's notes included the obligatory career reflections and thank yous, but came with a twist. Attached to the email was a spreadsheet detailing a few thousand violations committed by his coworkers over the years. During a 2019 sales meeting to discuss a new vehicle launch, a colleague blurted out, quote, "Let's not reinvent the ocean," unquote. Another meeting in 2016, someone started a sentence with, quote, "I don't want to sound like a broken drum here, but," unquote. For more than a decade, O'Brien kept a meticulous log of mixed metaphors and malaprops uttered in Ford's meetings. From company-wide gatherings to side conversations, it documents 2,229 linguistic breaches, including the exact quote context, name of the perpetrator, and color commentary. I'm sorry. I can't keep the smile off my face. This is too funny. It says after one colleague declared, quote, "It's a huge task, but we're trying to get our arms and legs around it," unquote, O'Brien quipped, quote, "Adding legs into the mix makes it sound kinda kinky," unquote. There's a leaderboard and a clear greatest of all time of verbal flubs. The list became so known and feared that one executive cursed O'Brien's name in a meeting after tripping up on an expression. Violators could appeal their inclusion, but success was rare. And nobody was above a grammatical roasting. Ford CEO Jim Farley twice made the list. O'Brien scribbled the first of these violations on a whiteboard one day in his office in 2014. The 55-year-old Detroit area native doesn't recall the first example of why he decided to formally call it out. He's an avid reader and crossword fan, but no English major or grammarian, if I'm saying that right. It says a botched expression simply caught his ear one day and he decided to record it for a laugh. Again, this guy's my hero. This is too good. He said he had been working in the department that oversees customer promotions and incentives on Ford's models such as zero interest loans and cashback details. It's a fast-paced job with long hours and deadline pressure. The board words, quote unquote, as they became known internally, were a way to inject some levity. Quote, "We weren't being mean," O'Brien said. "It was just funny." This guy has 4 foot by 4 foot whiteboards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of them. And 5 of them are filled up with these sayings of these individuals. I mean, filled to the brim, like no spaces in between them in columns. They have a picture of this. It's very funny, leaning up against his car. It says it took on a world of its own. Word of the board words spread within the company, and O'Brien would get tips from people in other divisions. Outsiders weren't exempt. A few visiting car dealers made the list. Eventually, O'Brien filled 6 whiteboards with the linguistic flubs scrawled tightly together in a mishmash of colors. Colleagues would occasionally pop into his office and laugh at the latest. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, yes, pandemic, I'm sure there was one, said no one with a brain, and everyone had to clear out for a lockdown, O'Brien moved the whiteboards to his garage. The spreadsheet is the more detailed repository of the data, not suppository of the data. A particularly unfortunate case of word misuse that made the board twice. It breaks out the examples into categories that include sports exercise related, for example, quote, "We're really low on money right now, we're dancing on thin ice," and quote, "We need to keep running in our swim lanes," unquote. Also this mixed metaphor, quote, "I know these are swing for the moon opportunities, but I think we should pursue them," unquote. Another category titled body parts, where it says, quote, "We need to make sure dealers have some skin in the teeth." God bless. They're just so dumb. Oh, they're so stupid. And quote, "It's no skin on our back." To which O'Brien appended that it sounded like, quote, "a horrible medical condition," unquote. Another category called food related, where it said, quote, "Too many cooks in the soup," unquote, and "read between the tea leaves," unquote. A final category of animals, the largest category with 80 entries, quote, "I'm not trying to beat a dead horse to death," unquote, and another one which read, "We need to talk about the elephant in the closet," unquote. One person said they had 3 duck-related violations alone. That distinction went to Mike Murphy, a longtime marketing manager, who holds the top spot for board word offenses with 184 infractions to date. He happened to hit his 100th during a Halloween party. There's a photo of him dressed up as Ace Frehley from rock band Kiss, standing aside O'Brien and a banner commemorating the dubious milestones. Very funny. That's funny. The picture's hilarious. Murphy blames his proclivity, partially on his longevity in the department and working closely with O'Brien, but he acknowledges that he talks a lot and, quote, "I also butcher the grammar and English language at times," unquote. It says, quote, "In general, the more you get going and the more you talk, the more likely you are to find your place on the board," he said, unquote. It goes on, it says, "The risk of getting flagged added to the pressure of presenting at meetings," Murphy said, quote, "All of a sudden, you'll hear a pen click and you're thinking, what did I say that wasn't right?" Often a board word would help diffuse an intense meeting, he said. Murphy appreciates O'Brien's grievance process, where he allows the person to argue their case before the entry is made. Murphy rarely wins the appeal, though. Like the time he blurted out, quote, He's going to be so happy, he'll be like a canary in a coal mine," unquote. Jesus. O'Brien explained that the canary in that particular idiom ends up dead. Murphy, laughing, explained that the canary was probably happy when it first got down there. It goes on, it says there were many repeat violators. O'Brien himself is among them with 110 board word offenses, ranking him number 3 on the list. Those were all flagged by his peers. There is a rule against self-reporting. He concedes that not everyone was a good sport about being called out. Some of the entries were anonymized. Recording the phonetic foibles of higher-ups presented a tricky dynamic. I'm losing my voice, my God. Excuse me. It's almost done with here. It says, once in a meeting, Ford's then head of U.S. sales, Andrew Frick, was making a point about a sales promotion. Quote, "We have a better program, but the competition has more foot on the ground," unquote, he said. Sensing the stumble, he looked up at O'Brien laughing. He said, quote, "Wait, it isn't feet on the ground. Damn it, O'Brien," unquote. Oh, that's awesome. A coworker once admitted to O'Brien that he rarely noticed his own verbal miscues in the moment, offering an explanation that earned him another citation. Quote, "I don't pick up on bored words as much," the colleague said. "I'm not the picture of grammar," unquote. That's funny. Talk about making, a little levity in a horrible work environment, probably, certainly high stress. That's very funny. All right. Just wanted to end on that one. I butcher words too from time to time, hopefully not metaphors. But anyway, linguistics. What an odd subject. Anywho, thanks for listening as always, and I'll catch you on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.